The warning lights turned red across every screen on Harbinger's Rest. Kim Do-yun stopped walking and looked up at the nearest display. His coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. The words on the screen made his blood run cold. Velith Empire declares ultimatum. Surrender Kepler Corridor in 7 days or face total war. Around him, aliens of a dozen different species began to panic. A group of tall, blue-skinned Morth traders dropped their cargo and ran toward the docking base. Small, furry Kindari merchants screamed in their high voices and hugged each other. Even the stone-faced Gorvian guards looked nervous. Do-yun was human. He was 34 years old. He had worked as a diplomat on this neutral space station for 6 years. In all that time, he had never seen anything like this. The Velith Empire was the most powerful force in the galaxy. They were insect-like creatures, each one standing 7 feet tall with hard shells and razor-sharp claws. They had conquered 40 star systems in the last century. No one had ever stopped them. And now they wanted the Kepler Corridor. Do-hyun knew why this was so dangerous. The Kepler Corridor was a series of jump points that connected half the galaxy's trade routes. Whoever controlled it controlled everything. Food shipments, medical supplies, raw materials. If the Velith took the corridor, they could starve entire planets into submission without firing a single weapon. He pushed through the crowded hallway toward the human section of the station. His mind was racing. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Assembly for 40 years. They were the youngest species in the coalition. They had no army worth mentioning, no great fleet, no ancient alliances. When the war came, humans would be crushed like insects under a boot. He found Park Yuna in her small office. She was surrounded by holographic displays showing Velith text. Her dark hair was messy, and her eyes had the red look of someone who had not slept. "You saw the announcement," Do-yun said. It was not a question. Yuna did not look away from her screens. "I have been watching the Velith channels for 3 hours. Something is wrong." "Wrong? They just threatened to destroy half the galaxy. What could be more wrong than that?" Yuna finally turned to face him. She was a xenolinguist. Her job was to study alien languages, to find meanings that others missed. She was very good at her job. "The ultimatum," she said slowly. "It uses a phrase I have never seen before. Old Velith. Very old. I had to dig through archives from 1,000 years ago to find it." She pulled up a section of text and pointed at a series of clicking symbols. Do-hyun could not read Velith, but he trusted Yuna completely. "This phrase here. It translates roughly to challenge of singular honor. The Velith stopped using it 3,000 years ago. It refers to an ancient ritual, a way to settle disputes without war." Do-hyun felt a small spark of hope in his chest. "Are you saying they do not actually want to fight?" "I am saying they are offering a choice. But they buried it so deep in old language that no one in the assembly would recognize it. The Morth do not study Velith history. The Gorvians do not care about ancient rituals. Every species in this coalition is too proud or too scared to look closely at what the Velith are really saying." Do-hyun sat down heavily in a chair. "So there might be a way out. A way to stop this war before it starts." "Maybe," Yuna said. "But we would need to prove it. We would need to show the assembly what this phrase means. And we would need someone to actually invoke the ritual. Then let us tell them. Let us bring this to the Assembly Council right now." Yuna laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Do-hyun, we are human. We have been part of this coalition for 40 years. The Morth have been members for 6,000 years. The Gorvians for 4,000. Do you really think they will listen to us?" Two young humans telling them they misread the most important document in galactic history? She was right. Do-hyun knew she was right. Humans were tolerated in the assembly, but they were not respected. They were too new, too weak, too primitive. The other species smiled politely at human diplomats and then ignored everything they said. But Doyen could not accept that. He could not sit in his small office and watch the galaxy burn because no one would listen. "Then we make them listen," he said quietly. "How?" He did not have an answer. Not yet. But he looked at the screens around Yuna's office. He looked at the ancient Velith text that held a secret no one else could see. And he made a decision. "Keep researching," he told her. "Find everything you can about this ritual. How it works. What it requires. Who can invoke it? And what will you do?" Dohyun stood up and straightened his uniform. "I am going to do something stupid." Yuna raised an eyebrow. "That does not sound like a plan." "It is not," Dohyun admitted. "But plans are for people who have power. We do not have power. We only have the one thing humans have always had." "What is that?" He smiled, though there was no joy in it. "Stubbornness. We are too stupid to know when we have already lost." He walked out of her office and into the chaos of the station. Around him, the galaxy was preparing for war. Ships were launching. Families were fleeing. Soldiers were loading weapons. And one human diplomat was about to do something that would change everything. He just did not know it yet. Dohyun spent 3 days in the station's archive. He barely ate. He barely slept. Yuna brought him food and coffee, and together they dug through thousands of years of Velith history. What they found changed everything. The ritual was called the Rite of Singular Voice. Long ago, before the Velith became conquerors, they had been philosophers. They believed that truth could end any conflict. They believed that one voice, speaking with honesty and courage, could change the minds of millions. The rite was simple in theory. When a dispute arose between species, any individual could invoke the ritual. They would face a Velith champion in a debate that lasted 3 days. No weapons, no armies, just words. If the challenger won, the dispute would end peacefully. If they lost, they would forfeit whatever they had offered as their stake. "This is it," Yuna said, her voice shaking with excitement. "This is how we stop the war. Someone just needs to invoke the rite." But there was a problem. A big one. The challenger had to offer something of equal value to what they were trying to protect. The Velith wanted the Kepler corridor, which was worth more than most planets. What could anyone offer that would match such a prize? "The Assembly has trillions of credits," Dohyun said. "They could offer money, resources, technology." Yuna shook her head. "The Velith do not care about money. They have more wealth than they could ever spend. The rite requires something personal, something that cannot be replaced." Dohyun stared at the ancient text on his screen. He read the words again and again, looking for some answer he might have missed. But the meaning was clear. The stake had to be real. It had to hurt. It had to prove that the challenger was serious. He knew what he had to do. He had known it since the moment Yuna first showed him the hidden phrase. He just had not wanted to admit it. "I will invoke the rite myself," he said quietly. Yuna stared at him. "What? The Assembly will never do it. They are too proud to admit they missed something so important. They would rather fight a war than let 2 humans save them. But what will you offer? You do not have anything valuable enough." Dohyun smiled sadly. "I have one thing. My memories. My entire life, recorded and given to the Velith archives forever. Every moment I have ever lived, from my first breath to my last." Yuna went pale. "Don't. That is not just your memories. That is your soul. Your identity. Everything that makes you who you are." "Yes," he agreed. "That is why it might be enough." Before Yuna could argue, the door to the archive burst open. Admiral Kang Yunji stormed in, followed by 2 security officers. She was the highest-ranking human in this sector of space. She was also very, very angry. "What do you think you are doing?" she demanded. "I have received reports that you have been accessing classified Velith files, that you are planning something unauthorized." Dahin stood to face her. He had met Admiral Kang before. She was a careful leader who believed humans should stay quiet and invisible. She thought that was how their species would survive. "I found a way to stop the war," he said simply. "The war is not our concern. Humanity has no stake in this conflict. We stay out of it. We survive. If the Velith win, they will control all trade in the galaxy. How long do you think Earth will last when they decide to cut off our supplies? A year? 6 months?" Admiral Kang's jaw tightened. She knew he was right, but she was also afraid. Do-hyun could see it in her eyes. "What you are suggesting is madness," she said. "One human cannot stop a galactic war." "One human is all we have," Do-hyun replied. "The Assembly will not listen to us. The other species think we are children." But the Velith buried a message in their ultimatum. They want someone to challenge them. They want to be proven wrong about the galaxy. "You do not know that. You are guessing." "Yes," Do-hyun admitted. "But sometimes guessing is all you can do." Admiral Kang was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to her security officers. "Arrest him. Put him in holding until this crisis passes." The officers stepped forward. Do-hyun did not resist as they grabbed his arms. He had expected this, but Yuna moved faster than anyone expected. She grabbed a data chip from the desk and threw it to Do-hyun. He caught it with his bound hands. "The shuttle bay codes," she said quickly. "Bay 17. I uploaded everything you need." The officers tried to stop her, but she blocked their path. Admiral Kang shouted orders. Everything became chaos. Do-hyun ran. He had never been athletic. He was a diplomat, not a soldier. But fear gave him speed he did not know he had. He sprinted through the station's corridors, dodging confused aliens and panicked crowds. The shuttle bay was nearly empty. Most ships had already fled. But in Bay 17, a small transport vessel waited with its engines warming up. Do-hyun did not hesitate. He climbed aboard, sealed the hatch, and launched into space behind him. He could hear Admiral Kang's voice over the radio, ordering him to return. Ahead of him, the stars stretched out like diamonds on black velvet. He pointed the shuttle toward Velith space and began to fly. The journey would take 2 days. He used that time to prepare. He studied the rights rules again and again. He practiced arguments in his head. He tried to imagine what the Velith would say and how he could respond. But mostly, he thought about home. He thought about Bizen, the city where he was born. He thought about his mother's cooking and his father's quiet wisdom. He thought about the girl he had loved in university and the friends he had lost to time and distance. If he failed, all of that would be gone. The Velith would take his memories, and Kim Do-hyun would be nothing more than an empty shell. But if he succeeded, Earth would survive. Humanity would survive. Everything he loved would continue, even if he could not remember it. The shuttle flew on through the darkness. On the 3rd day, he reached Velith space. A massive warship appeared on his sensors, then another, then a dozen more. He was surrounded. His radio crackled. A cold voice spoke in perfect standard. "Human vessel, you have entered Velith territory without permission. Identify yourself and state your purpose, or you will be destroyed." Do-hyun took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything depended on the next few seconds. "My name is Kim Do-hyun," he said, his voice steady. "I am a citizen of Earth and a member of the Galactic Assembly. I invoke the right of singular voice. I challenge your claim to the Kepler corridor." There was a long pause. Then the voice spoke again, and this time it sounded almost surprised. The right has not been invoked in 3,000 years. You understand what you are asking, human? I do. Another pause. Then slowly the warships began to move aside, creating a path toward the planet below. Then come, little human, the voice said. The Hive Queen will hear your challenge. Do-hyun flew toward the planet, alone and afraid, but he did not turn back. Veth Prime was a world of black stone and red sky. Do-hyun stepped out of his shuttle and felt the hot wind against his face. The air smelled like metal and ash. 1,000 Velith soldiers stood in perfect lines, watching him. They were terrifying creatures. Each one stood 7 feet tall with shells as black as midnight. Their eyes were like burning coals, and their claws could cut through steel. At the front of the army stood a Velith larger than the others. He wore golden markings on his shell that showed his rank. His voice was like rocks grinding together. I am Hive Commander Tessic, he said. I have fought 60 wars and won them all. I have crushed civilizations older than your entire species. And you think you can challenge us with words? Do-hyun looked up at the massive warrior. His legs were shaking, but he forced himself to stand straight. I do not think I can win, he admitted. But I think I have to try. Tessic made a sound that might have been laughter. At least you are honest, little human. Come, the Hive Queen waits. They walked through a city carved from black stone. Everything was massive, built for creatures twice Do-hyun's size. He felt like a child in a world of giants. The amphitheater was ancient. Do-hyun could feel the weight of history pressing down on him as he entered. The stone seats rose in circles around a central platform. Thousands of Velith filled those seats, their compound eyes all fixed on him. And above them all, on a throne of crystal and bone, sat the Hive Queen. She was the largest Velith Do-hyun had ever seen. Her shell was pure white, and her eyes glowed with an intelligence that made him feel very small and very alone. So, she said, and her voice filled the entire amphitheater. A human has come to speak for the galaxy. Interesting. Do-hyun bowed deeply. Thank you for honoring the ancient rite, Your Majesty. I did not honor it. I was curious. Your species is barely out of its caves, yet you dare to challenge us. I want to know why. Because no one else would, Do-hyun said simply. The Hive Queen studied him for a long moment. Then she gestured with one massive claw. The rite will begin. Hive Commander Tessic will speak for the Empire. You will speak for yourself and for the galaxy you wish to save. The debate will last 3 days. No rest, no food, no water. If you collapse, you lose. If you fail to answer a question, you lose. If you convince us that peace serves our interests better than war, you win. She paused. Do you understand the stakes, human? I do. Then let us begin. The first day was the hardest. Tessic was a master of debate. He had been trained since birth to argue and persuade. He attacked Do-hyun's arguments like a warrior attacking an enemy fortress. Why should we accept peace? Tessic demanded. We are stronger than any force in the galaxy. We could take the corridor in a week. We could burn Earth in a month. Power is the only truth in this universe, and we have power. Do-hyun thought carefully before answering. You are right that you have power. But power is not the same as strength. A storm has power. A fire has power. But they do not create. They only destroy. Destruction clears the way for new growth. Sometimes, Do-hyun agreed. But you have been destroying for 1,000 years. What have you grown? Your empire is feared, yes. But is it loved? When you conquer a world, do its people celebrate? Or do they hate you in silence and wait for the day they can be free? Tessic's eyes narrowed. You speak of love as if it matters. Love is weakness. My people once believed that too, Do-Yun said. We built empires on blood and fear. We conquered our neighbors and called it glory. And do you know what happened? Every empire fell. Every kingdom crumbled. The conquerors became dust, and their names were forgotten. Human history is not Velith history. No, but history has patterns. Every species that is ruled through fear alone has eventually fallen. Because fear does not create loyalty. It creates enemies waiting for their chance. The debate continued through the night. Do-Han's voice grew hoarse. His legs ached from standing. But he refused to show weakness. On the second day, he changed his approach. Instead of arguing politics, he began to tell stories. He told them about Earth. He described the Korean peninsula, where his ancestors had lived for thousands of years. He explained how his country had been divided by war and hatred, how families were torn apart, how brothers became enemies. For 50 years, my people lived in fear, he said. We pointed weapons at each other across a line drawn in the dirt. We taught our children to hate. We forgot that we were one family. And then? The Hive Queen asked. She seemed genuinely curious. And then, slowly, we remembered. We built bridges instead of walls. We traded instead of fought. It took generations. It was not easy. But eventually, my people became one again. A pretty story, Tessic said. But what does it prove? It proves that change is possible. Even for enemies who have hated each other for lifetimes. Even for wounds that seem impossible to heal. He described his grandmother, who had fled the north as a child and spent 60 years dreaming of the home she could never return to. He described the day, decades later, when she finally crossed the border and saw her childhood village again. She was 92 years old, Do-Hyun said, and his voice cracked with emotion. She had waited her whole life for that moment. And when she got there, do you know what she did? She cried. Not because of what she had lost, but because of what her people had finally found. The amphitheater was silent. Even the warriors had stopped clicking their claws. Peace is not weakness, Do-Hyun continued. Peace is the hardest thing there is. It requires courage that war does not demand. It requires us to see our enemies as people, to admit that we might be wrong, to choose building over burning. Tessic shook his massive head. Beautiful words. But the galaxy does not run on words. It runs on strength. Then let me show you strength, Do-Hyun said. I came here alone. I have no weapons, no army, no fleet. Your warriors could kill me with a single blow. But I am still standing. I am still speaking. Why? Because I believe in something larger than myself. That is strength. The strength to hope when hope seems foolish. The strength to try when failure seems certain. He looked directly at the Hive Queen. Your people were philosophers once. You believed in truth and honor and the power of ideas. What happened to that? When did you forget who you used to be? The Hive Queen's eyes glowed brighter. For a moment, Do-Hyun thought she might order his death right there. But she did not. Instead, she leaned forward on her throne and studied him with new interest. Continue, human, she said. You have earned another day. Do-Hyun bowed and prepared for the final trial. He had survived 48 hours. But the hardest part was still to come. By the third day, Do-Hyun could barely stand. His body screamed for rest, for food, for water. His vision blurred at the edges. Every breath was a struggle. But something had changed in the amphitheater. The Velith who had clicked their claws in contempt on the first day now sat in silence. Some of them swayed gently in their seats, which Yuna had told him was their way of showing deep thought. Even Tessic looked different. The hatred in his eyes had softened into something else. Curiosity, perhaps. or respect. The Hive Queen had not moved from her throne in 3 days. She watched everything with those glowing eyes that seemed to see into Do-Yoon's soul. "You have spoken well, human," she said as the final session began. "You have argued with skill and passion. You have told stories that moved even my coldest warriors. But now comes the moment of truth." Tessic stepped forward. "The right demands balance. You ask us to give up our claim to the corridor. What do you offer in return? What do you sacrifice?" This was the question Do-Yoon had been waiting for. The question that would decide everything. He thought about Yuna's words back on the station. "This is not just your memories. This is your soul. Everything that makes you who you are. She was right. What he was about to offer would cost him everything. If he won, he would save the galaxy but lose himself. If he lost, the same thing would happen, and the galaxy would burn anyway. But some things were worth losing yourself for. "I offer my life's record," Do-Yoon said clearly. "Every memory I have ever made. From my first breath to this moment. My childhood in Bizen, watching the ship sail into the harbor. My mother's face when she smiled at me. The smell of my grandmother's cooking. My first day at school. My first heartbreak. My first failure. My first success." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I offer you the day my mother died. I was 23 years old. I held her hand as she took her last breath. She told me to be brave, to always choose kindness over strength. I carry those words in my heart every day of my life." The amphitheater was completely silent. "I offer you my wedding day," Do-Yoon continued. "I married a woman named Han Somi. She had the most beautiful laugh I have ever heard. We divorced 3 years later because I was too focused on my work. I still dream about her sometimes." Tears were running down his face now, but he did not try to hide them. "I offer you every sunrise I have ever watched, every book I have ever read, every friend I have ever made, every moment of joy and sorrow and fear and hope that has made me who I am. All of it, everything, extracted and preserved in your archives forever." He looked at the Hive Queen directly. "Your descendants will look at these memories 1,000 years from now. They will see a human who believed in the Velith. A human who thought your people were capable of choosing peace over war, of choosing wisdom over conquest, of choosing to be better than you have been." He took a deep breath. "And if I'm wrong about you, they will know that too. They will see that a human came to you with an open heart, and you crushed him anyway. That will be your legacy. That will be what your children's children remember." The silence stretched on and on. Do-Yoon could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Finally, Tessic spoke. His voice was different now, softer, almost gentle. "You would give up everything you are, every memory that makes you human. Why?" "Because my memories are not just mine," Do-Yoon said. "They belong to everyone who shaped them. My mother, my grandmother, my teachers, my friends, my enemies. Every person I have ever known lives in my memory. If I can save the galaxy with those memories, then they become part of something larger. They become proof that one life can matter." "But you would be empty," Tessic said. "You would be a shell. You would not remember your mother's face or your wedding day. You would not know who you are." "No," Do-Yoon agreed. "But others would. The Velith would carry my memories for all time. And maybe, someday, one of them would look at those memories and see that humans are not so different from you. That we love and fear and hope and dream, just like you do." He fell to his knees. He had no strength left. But he kept talking. "That is what I offer. My entire existence as proof of what humans can be. Not warriors. Not conquerors. Just people who believe in something larger than themselves." The Hive Queen rose from her throne. The movement sent a ripple of shock through the amphitheater. Dahyun had read in the archives that the Hive Queen had not left her throne in 400 years. Not for treaties. Not for victories. Not for anything. But she was moving now. She descended the steps slowly, her massive form making the stone shake with each footstep. The Velith warriors parted before her like water before a ship. She stopped in front of Do-Yun, towering over his kneeling form. Her compound eyes reflected his face 1,000 times. "In all my years," she said quietly, "no one has ever offered what you have offered. Empires have bargained with gold and armies and planets. But you have offered something none of them thought to give. What is that, Your Majesty?" "Faith," she said. "You have given us faith we did not earn. You believed in us when we had given you no reason to believe. You saw something in my people that we had forgotten ourselves." She reached down with one massive claw. Do-Hyun flinched, expecting death, but she simply touched his shoulder gently. "Stand, Kim Do-Yun of Earth," she said. "Stand and hear the judgment of the Velith Empire." He struggled to his feet. His legs could barely hold him. But he stood. The Hive Queen turned to address the entire amphitheater. Her voice echoed off the ancient stones. 3,000 years ago, my ancestors created the right of singular voice because they believed in the power of truth. They believed that one voice, speaking with courage, could change the fate of worlds. Over time, we forgot that belief. We chose conquest over conversation. We chose fear over faith. She looked back at Do-Yun. Today, a human has reminded us who we used to be. She raised her claw high, and every Velith in the amphitheater fell silent. The rite is complete. The human has spoken with honor and courage. He has offered his soul for the sake of others. This is the kind of strength my ancestors believed in. Do-Yun's heart was pounding. He could not breathe. The Velith Empire withdraws its claim to the Kepler corridor. The words hung in the air like a miracle. The ultimatum is ended. The war will not come. Do-Hyun's legs finally gave out. He collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down his face. He had won, but before darkness took him, he heard the Hive Queen's final words. "Someone take this human to the medical bay. He has earned our respect, and he has earned his memories." Then everything went black. Do-Hyun woke up 3 days later in a room filled with soft light. For a moment, he did not know where he was. The walls were smooth and white, and strange machines hummed quietly around his bed. Then he remembered everything, and he sat up so fast that his head spun. "Easy," said a familiar voice. "You almost died. Your body needs time to heal." He turned and saw Park Yuna sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked exhausted, but she was smiling. "How are you here?" he asked. His voice was rough and weak. "The Velith invited me. After you collapsed, the Hive Queen sent a message to Harbinger's Rest. She asked for your colleague, the one who found the hidden phrase in the ultimatum. She wanted to meet me." Do-Hyun blinked. "She knows about you?" "She knows everything. Apparently, the Velith were watching us from the moment you started researching the rite. They wanted to see if anyone was clever enough to find their message." "And what did she say to you?" Yuna's smile grew wider. "She said that humans are more interesting than she expected. She said our species has a rare gift. We see things that others miss." Before Do-Yun could respond, the door opened. Admiral Kang Yoonji walked in, followed by 2 officers. Do-Hyun tensed. He remembered her ordering his arrest. He remembered running through the station while her voice demanded his return. But Admiral Kang did not look angry. She looked tired and old and very, very humble. She stopped at the foot of his bed and did something he never expected. She bowed deeply. "I was wrong," she said quietly. "I told you to stay invisible. I told you to hide. I thought that was how humanity would survive. But you showed me a different way." She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and golden. It was her officer's insignia, the symbol of her rank and authority. She placed it on Do-Yoon's blanket. "I do not deserve to wear this," she said. "I was a coward when courage was needed. You were brave when bravery seemed foolish. The fleet should follow your example, not mine." "Admiral, I cannot accept this," Do-Hyun protested. "You already have," she said. "The Galactic Assembly has been watching your trial. Every species in the coalition saw what you did. They saw a human stand alone against the most feared empire in the galaxy and win with nothing but words." She straightened up. "Humanity is no longer the youngest member of the Assembly. After today, we are something else entirely. What are we? The ones who see what others miss. The ones who try when trying seems hopeless. The Assembly has voted to create a new position, a species that will serve as mediators for all future disputes. Neutral voices who can speak for everyone. And they chose humans? They chose you," Admiral Kang said. "You and anyone who shares your courage." The next few weeks were a blur. Do-Hyun was invited to speak before the full Galactic Assembly. He stood in the Great Hall where the oldest species in the galaxy had gathered for millennia. He looked out at the Morith and the Gorvians and the Kindari and 100 other races he could not name. And he told them what he had learned. "The Velith were not our enemies," he said. "They were afraid. Afraid that the galaxy had forgotten how to talk to each other. Afraid that war had become the only language anyone understood. They issued their ultimatum not because they wanted to conquer, but because they wanted to be proven wrong." He paused. "I proved them wrong, but I could not have done it alone. I had a friend who saw what no one else could see. I had ancestors who taught me that peace is harder than war. I had a mother who told me to be brave and to always choose kindness." He looked at the Velith delegation. The Hive Queen herself had come to the assembly, the first time a Velith ruler had left their homeworld in 1,000 years. "We are all connected," Do-Hyun said. "Every species in this room has something to teach the others. Every culture has wisdom that the galaxy needs. The Velith remembered that truth before we did. They just needed someone to remind them that they were right." The assembly voted that day to reform itself. No longer would species be ranked by age or power. Every voice would carry equal weight. Every dispute would begin with dialogue, not threats. And humans would stand at the center, not as rulers, but as bridges. Do-Hyun returned to Earth a hero. But he did not feel like one. He felt like a man who had gotten very lucky. He visited his grandmother's grave in the mountains outside Bizen. He sat in the grass and told her everything that had happened. "You were right," he whispered. "Kindness is stronger than violence. Words are mightier than weapons." I almost forgot that, but I remembered just in time. A year later, the first Human Mediation Academy opened on Earth. Students came from every colony and outpost to learn the skills that Do-Hyun had used: xenolinguistics, history, psychology, and most importantly, empathy. Yuna became the Academy's first director. Admiral Kang retired from the military and joined the faculty. Even Hive Commander Tessic traveled to Earth to share the Velith perspective on conflict resolution. The galaxy changed slowly. Wars still happened. Disputes still arose. But more often than not, they were solved with words instead of weapons. Mediators in blue uniforms traveled to conflict zones across the stars, armed with nothing but patience and understanding. Do-Hyun watched it all with quiet pride. He had not saved the galaxy alone. He had just opened the door that others could walk through. On the 10th anniversary of the rite, the Hive Queen sent him a gift. It was a crystal containing a copy of the recording from the amphitheater. Every word he had spoken, every emotion he had shown, every moment of his trial preserved forever. With it came a note in the Hive Queen's own hand. You offered us your memories. We chose not to take them, but we made our own record so that our children will remember what you taught us. A human believed in us when we did not believe in ourselves. We will not forget. Dahyun placed the crystal on his shelf, next to a photograph of his mother and a small jar of dirt from his grandmother's garden. He was 64 years old now. His hair was gray, and his bones ached in the morning. But when he looked at the stars through his window, he still felt the same thing he had felt as a young man: hope. The galaxy was not perfect. It never would be. But it was better than it had been. And that was enough. Kim Do-hyun had done what needed doing. He had spoken when others were silent. He had believed when others had given up. He had proven that one voice could change everything. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The historians would call his actions the human gambit. They would write books about him and make films about his life. They would debate his decisions and analyze his words. But Do-hyun never cared about any of that. When people asked him why he had risked everything, he always gave the same answer: because someone had to try, and I was the one who was there. Then he would smile, remember his mother's face, and go back to watching the stars. Somewhere out there, across the vastness of space, the Velith were watching them too, and both species were choosing peace.